Most people think coffee is just coffee, a dark drink, a bitter taste, a simple habit every morning. But in one place, it's a smooth glass of milk with a hint of caffeine. In another, it's a thick, muddy liquid you don't even finish. Some versions are sweet like dessert. Others are so strong they're diluted just to be drinkable. And one of them doesn't even start in a coffee machine. It starts inside an animal. The strange part is, all of these come from the exact same thing, the same bean, the same plant. So how does one ingredient turn into something so completely different? To understand that, you have to strip coffee down to its simplest form, because everything begins with a single concentrated shot. And if you enjoy exploring how everyday things turn out to be far more complex than they seem, consider subscribing to the channel, because this is only the beginning. At the center of almost every modern coffee drink is espresso. Most people assume it's just a smaller cup of coffee, but it's actually the opposite. Espresso is more concentrated, more intense, and more controlled than regular coffee. It's made by forcing hot water through very fine coffee grounds under high pressure. This process extracts flavor quickly, creating a dense liquid with a thin golden layer on top called crema. That crema isn't just visual, it's a sign of proper extraction, a balance between pressure, temperature, and grind size. And because espresso is so concentrated, it becomes the base for almost everything else. Change what you add to it, and you change the entire experience. Because the moment you introduce milk, everything starts to shift. Most people think all milk coffee tastes basically the same, just coffee with milk. But small changes in ratio and texture completely transform the drink. A latte, for example, uses a large amount of steamed milk. This softens the intensity of espresso, making it smooth and easy to drink. Cappuccino, on the other hand, balances espresso, milk, and foam in equal parts. The foam adds air, giving it a lighter, slightly thicker texture. And then there's the flat white, less foam, less milk, which means the coffee flavor comes through much more clearly. Same base, same espresso, but three completely different experiences. Because in coffee, texture matters just as much as taste. And once people realized they could control strength, they started changing something else entirely. Not milk, but water. At first, an Americano might seem like the simplest coffee on this list, just espresso, with hot water added, which sounds like watering it down. But the story behind it is what makes it interesting. During World War II, American soldiers stationed in Italy found espresso too strong, so they started adding hot water to make it more familiar, something closer to the coffee they were used to back home. The result was lighter, less intense, but still carried the character of espresso, and over time it became its own category. Not just diluted coffee, but a different way of experiencing the same base. But even this still relies on heat, and at some point, people began asking a different question. What if you removed heat altogether? Most people assume hot water is essential to making coffee, but cold brew ignores that completely. Instead of heat, it uses time. Coffee grounds are steeped in cold water for 12 to 24 hours. This slow extraction changes everything. Without heat, fewer bitter and acidic compounds are released. The result is smoother, naturally sweeter, and much less sharp. It doesn't taste like iced coffee. It tastes like a different drink entirely. And then came an even stranger version, nitro cold brew. Infused with nitrogen gas, just like beer. Tiny bubbles form a thick, creamy texture and a soft foam on top. No milk, no sugar, but it still feels rich and slightly sweet, because the texture tricks your perception. At this point, coffee is no longer just about flavor, it's about physics. But some people didn't stop at changing the brewing method, they changed the role of coffee itself. Coffee is usually bitter. That's part of its identity. But some drinks completely redefine that. Mocha is one of the simplest examples. Chocolate is added directly into espresso, then combined with milk. The bitterness softens. The drink becomes something closer to hot chocolate with caffeine. Then there's affogato, a scoop of ice cream drowned in a shot of hot espresso. The contrast is immediate. Hot and cold, bitter and sweet, liquid and solid. It's not just a drink anymore, it's a dessert. And this shift matters, because once coffee crosses into sweetness, it stops being something you tolerate and becomes something you crave. But in some places, sweetness didn't come from chocolate. It came from something far more unexpected: eggs. Most people would never think to put eggs in coffee, but in Vietnam, it became the solution to a problem. In the 1940s, fresh milk was scarce, so instead of milk, egg yolks were whipped with sugar and condensed milk. The result was a thick, creamy foam layered over strong coffee. It doesn't taste like eggs, it tastes rich, smooth, almost like a dessert, something closer to liquid tiramisu than a typical drink. And in Spain, a similar idea appears in a different form, café bombón. Equal parts espresso and condensed milk, 2 layers in a glass, dark coffee on top, sweet, dense milk at the bottom. Simple ingredients, but completely different experience. Because once texture and sweetness change, coffee stops being just a drink and starts becoming something designed. But in many parts of the world, coffee was never just about taste to begin with. It was something much deeper. In some cultures, coffee isn't rushed. It isn't grabbed and taken to go. It's prepared slowly, deliberately. Turkish coffee is one of the oldest examples. Finely ground coffee is boiled directly in water. No filter. The grounds settle at the bottom of the cup. You don't finish it. You stop before reaching the sediment. In Ethiopia, the birthplace of coffee, the process becomes a ceremony. Beans are roasted over an open flame, ground by hand, brewed in a clay pot, served in multiple rounds, each one slightly weaker than the last. It can take hours, and it's meant to be shared. Arabic coffee adds spices like cardamom, changing not just flavor, but identity. In these cases, coffee isn't just consumed, it's experienced, a ritual, a social act. But not all coffee traditions are ancient. Some of them were created by accident. Not every coffee drink was carefully designed. Some of them happened by mistake. Greek frappe is one of those cases. In 1957 at a trade fair, someone couldn't find hot water, so instant coffee was mixed with cold water and shaken. What came out was a thick foam, light, airy, and completely unexpected. That accident became one of Greece's most iconic drinks. Decades later, something similar happened again. Dalgona coffee, a mix of instant coffee, sugar, and hot water whipped into a thick foam, then placed on top of cold milk. It spread across the world in weeks, not because it was new, but because it was visual. Simple to make, easy to share. Coffee for the first time became a global trend overnight, which shows something important. Coffee doesn't just evolve through tradition. It evolves through moments, through accidents, through the internet. But some variations don't come from accidents at all. They come from completely rethinking what coffee is supposed to do. Most people drink coffee for energy, but some versions try to replace something else entirely. Bulletproof coffee is one example. Instead of milk or sugar, it's blended with butter and MCT oil. The idea is to provide long-lasting energy without a spike in blood sugar. It turns coffee into something closer to a meal. Then there's mazagran, one of the earliest forms of iced coffee, served cold, sometimes with lemon juice. Sharp, refreshing, almost like a mix between coffee and lemonade. And in Hong Kong, there's yuanyang, a blend of coffee and milk tea. 2 completely different drinks combined into one. Bitter and smooth, strong and creamy. It works not because they're similar, but because they're different. At this point, the line between coffee and everything else starts to blur. It's no longer just about beans, it's about what you can turn them into. And then, there's one final version that pushes this idea further than anything else. Most people assume coffee begins and ends in a machine, ground, brewed, poured. But Kopi Luwak follows a completely different path. It starts with a small animal called the Asian palm civet. These animals eat coffee cherries, and during digestion, enzymes break down proteins inside the beans. After that, the beans are collected, cleaned, roasted, and brewed. The idea is that this process reduces bitterness and creates a smoother, more complex flavor. But what made it truly famous is its rarity and its price. It became known as one of the most expensive coffees in the world, at times selling for hundreds of dollars per kilogram. But this also created a problem. High demand led to mass production, animals kept in cages, force-fed coffee cherries, turning something rare into something controversial. So while Kopi Luwak represents one of the most unusual transformations coffee can go through, it also reveals something deeper. The moment something becomes valuable, it changes, and not always in a good way. By this point, coffee no longer feels like a single drink. It's something much larger than that. The same bean can become something strong, something smooth, something sweet, or something completely unexpected. What changes is not the coffee itself, but everything around it, how it's made, what it's mixed with, and the people who shape it. So the next time you take a sip, you're not just drinking coffee, you're experiencing one version of a much bigger system. And if you enjoy discovering how simple things can turn out to be far more complex than they seem, Consider subscribing, because there's always more beneath the surface.